Hi there. We're going to do a short introduction into very big Chinese numbers. Chinese numbers, if you have really big ones and if you really try to write them completely in Chinese, are very difficult. Even if you have people who are born in China and whose mother language is Chinese, even they have trouble. So this is just a short introduction to give you some idea of what you're dealing with if you have large numbers in Chinese. This is yībǎi. It means 100. Yībǎi. It looks a little bit like white, like bai, but it's just 100. Yībǎi. So if you remove this thing here, of course, then you just have white. You have 1,000. 1,000 is 1,000. Very simple character, very easy to memorize. You have yi1. yi1, and yi1 is 10,000. This looks different than a traditional character, and this already introduces you to the way that Chinese people think about big numbers. Usually, the European or American way of counting is that if you have really big numbers, you always go through 3 digits. You have 1,000, it has 3 digits, then you add 3 digits, you are at 1,000,000. And then you add 3 digits more, you are at 1,000,000,000, 3 digits more at 1,000,000,000,000. But Chinese people much rather think in 4 digits, which makes everything very, very difficult, which you will see. This is yībǎi1. yībǎi1. And yībǎi1 means, as we have learned, 110,000. And this is, if you have 2 zeros, and 4 zeros, you have 6 zeros, and this is 1,000,000. You have 110,000. So it's even more difficult than I have explained, and it's not at all the way American people or Chinese or European people or English people would count. Then you have this. This is E. E just means 100 million. So this is 1,000,000, but instead of taking another bai, you take this little thing here, which means 100 million. So very nice already. Then this, of course, is 1,000,000,000. So you multiply this thing with 10, and you get 10,000,000, which is 1,000,000,000. Now for something very interesting. I tried to write down this number in Chinese, and I didn't do it myself. I asked a friend because it's very difficult. Taking a long number, so in English this is 905,543,267,185. 905,543,267,185. So I myself, I couldn't do it without looking it up, and I asked one of my Chinese friends to do it for me, and even he couldn't do it right away. He also had to think about it a little, and this shows you that writing really large numbers in Chinese, usually the way it is done here, that this is not the usual way people in their everyday lives do it. Let me fold this here for a second. Usually, when you read a Chinese newspaper, then you usually only have, or you usually start off with some Hindu Arabic numerals, spelled out in Chinese. So this is the whole number, and you can see that it's not as easy to read. It is certainly not as easy to create if you are given this number and then you have to create it. So as I said, in newspapers you mostly read few, like 9, and then there's a Chinese character for what, 9,000 or something, or no, rather for very big numbers. You have 9 and you have a very big number, for example, from a macroeconomical perspective. But let's just read this big number here. 9055亿4326万7285。9055亿4326万71。I read this here wrong. This is supposed to be a 1. I have to cross this out. I made a little mistake. So this is a 1 right here, a 1. So it's correct, at least. How can I do this? How can we do this so that it's right? So it's 9055亿4326万7185。This is the way. If you already saw my other video, then you should be able to read this. And this is the exact same number, but it doesn't use the usual Chinese characters for using it in everyday life. This is the financial way of writing it from the financial sectors. So this is exactly the same. You would read it exactly the same way you would read the other number, but you will use the alternatives. And I've put into the description all the vocabulary, all the numbers, and all of their alternative versions, so that you can look it up and maybe memorize it if you like. And the reasoning that we don't only have this way of writing big numbers, but also have this way of writing big numbers, is that these numbers here, if you write them, for example, if you go to a bank and you fill out a form, some kind of form, then it is much easier to manipulate these numbers. If you add one stroke or connect one stroke, it is much easier to turn these numbers into a different number than it is with these numbers, because these numbers are more unique. For example, if you watch this number, 9, then this number here, Joe, is much simpler, and it might be more practical for everyday life. If you want to write something down for somebody, please get me 9 eggs, for example, 9个蛋糕, or 9个单词, rather, not cakes, but eggs. This is much easier to write, but it's not as safe as this one. So if you write a check and you write a 9, then if you write this, then it's much easier to manipulate this. Or say, if you write a 2 in a check, then you can just add one more stroke on top and you get a 3. But if you get a 2 here, where is it? It is right here. It is right here. Wait a second. This is the 2 with the way you would write it for a bank form. Then this R is much easier, is much harder to forge than this R here. But as you might see, these characters are more complicated, and they're more complicated to memorize how to write them. So when you go into a Chinese bank, then you will probably see signs where the characters are explained. Because even Chinese people, most Chinese people don't know these numbers by heart, or many of them don't do, and most Chinese people would have difficulty writing such big numbers into Chinese. So as I said, this is just an introduction to large Chinese numbers, but I hope if you refer to the 生词 in the vocabulary in the description, then you might learn something from this and it might help you improve yourself. Thanks, and see you again later.